Okay. As we begin all of these, and I was kind of excited when I was preparing tonight's session. So tonight's session, I've given it 14 different titles, I think. It's really about the artist in the civic problem solving space. But we are really interested in your creative process and how that kind of aligns with civic problem solving or community challenges, or doing things in a new way, or innovating. So there are lots of ways to think about this. And when I put together the presentation for tonight, it's going to be a lot of conversation and discussion. It really echoed everything that we're already doing. So I feel, and it's a legitimate structure that people use all around the world. So we'll talk about this tonight. But with the Year of the Artist, we are advancing community goals. We're integrating artists and civic problem solving. We're exploring and experimenting, doing things in new ways. We're paying artists. We're strengthening the network of artists in the community and the networks that surround artists in the community. And then we're connecting those networks to each other. So lots of connection. We're having fun and doing this with a sense of play, and we're building a learning community. That's what all of this is adding up to. So that's really all of this is going to be the focus of the conversation tonight. And we're going to start it with an appreciative interview. And Catherine Devine, since she's just coming off of an event and a project through her art residency, she's going to be our subject for the interview. And it's going to be an example for us. In a way we can have conversations, in ways we're going to continue to have conversations with artists as we move through the Year of the Artist. Then we're going to focus on liberating structures. And this is a book. It's pretty simple. It's available online. It's all in the Creative Commons. They welcome you to use it, use the tools in there and to share them. And everything that's in the book that I have is online for free. That's one reason why I think it's a really good resource for us, even though sometimes the language is, it's not academic necessarily, but you have to dig it. It's meaty. You can dig into it. But we're going to focus on those liberating structures and give a kind of an overview of it, and then talk about the artist at work and why we think the artists are liberators, where the artist can have a particular way and particular potential to help us do things in new ways. Then we're going to explore some, 3 different exercises or ways that we can dig into that. And all this is going to be very conversational. And then we'll close out with a resource reminder. And then we'll turn off the recording, and we'll give you a space to ask questions or share things that are happening with your project that you might not want to have recorded. And our updates. So there's not going to be a session next week. We're taking a week off. And then on the 22nd, we're doing the session on meeting the artist in residence. So artists in residence that are working on their projects, they're going to be able to share what they're working on, and we'll have a chance to ask them questions and kind of dig into how we might be able to get involved in the work that they're doing. Then the third Monday gallery talk, November 21st, that Catherine Devine's coordinating. I will say it might be a game. You might walk into the municipal building and have to look for the art. I say that in jest. Our 4th floor gallery talk might become the 1st floor gallery talk because they're going to do some construction on the 4th floor, and I might be in there this weekend moving that show, just to make sure we're protecting the art. And then November 15th. That's on Tuesday. That's the deadline for the Art on First call for emerging artists. If you're not represented by a gallery or showing in a gallery right now, and you're just getting going, they're doing a show specifically for you. And so artonfirst.com, you can find the application. So with that, Catherine, are you ready?
Yeah, I'm trying to get this to where it's not so glary, but yeah, I'm good. You can hear me?
Yep, we can hear
Okay.
you. Okay, so I'll share this screen and for a minute or two, and then I'm just going to take it off of share screen so we can focus on Catherine. This is actually an exercise out of these liberating structures, and it's the appreciative interview. And there's nothing, it's not rocket science. None of this stuff is rocket science. But we're going to ask Catherine a question, and we're going to focus on the positive things. So Catherine just did a project that addressed a challenge, and we're going to kind of dig into what her challenge was that she was working on, and then how well we're going to and what she accomplished. So Catherine, this is a very specific question. Please tell me a story about a time when you worked on a challenge with others and you are proud of what you accomplished. Now, this is
Okay,
a question that we're asking Catherine, and she's modeling it for us. So we can all kind of take a moment and think about a time when you've worked on a challenge with others and what you were proud and that you were proud of what you accomplished. Yeah.
well, I'm, so um my so full of ideas because of the weekend was the biggest art project I think I've ever done, because it was something that I had dreamed up, but it was a collaboration with other people in a pretty grand way, where a lot of moving pieces that I had no control over, and just kind of trusting that it was all going to come together. So we did the Ginkgo Tree Festival. We ended up having guests from the tree stewards. We had representatives from all the sister cities. So, I don't want to get too off topic, but I do want to say it was a challenge, but it was in some ways a really positive opportunity for me, because I really stayed on task with the residency with sister cities, which their motto, I just learned about it because I got this artist residency, is promoting peace, one person, one community at a time. So I really kept my vision of what I wanted to accomplish very focused on that. So every opportunity I had to get flustered or worried, I was like, really applied it to my own self, like just trust it'll work out, just we're all doing our best. And if I also want to say, the clarity I had working with the representatives from sister cities, the leadership, they were very positive about the idea. They were excited about it. And they were very helpful, supportive, and also very clear that their main goal was more awareness of what Sister Cities does. So there was a very easy bar to measure, to say, was this successful? So it was good to feel proud that it did work out. The musicians showed up, the rain stopped, folks came down. I think it was just exactly what I had envisioned, just an easygoing opportunity for people to be together. I'm proud of that.
Terrific. And then I love that the kind of the positive vibe, the helpfulness of folks as you reached out. You had the organization that you're attached to, Sister Cities. Then you had musicians there that you worked with, and you hired other local artists to perform and to create work for you as part of it. So I could see kind of the way the project spread out a little bit. Did you talk a little bit about the feeling of working with folks? And you said you started off by saying this is like one of the biggest projects that you had pulled together, which sometimes can seem overwhelming, but it doesn't sound like it was overwhelming. It sounds like you had lots of support and kind of connections.
Yeah, I think I did feel like, the weather was very unpredictable, and we had decided to stay in the space. We had originally planned it rain or shine, so there wasn't really a plan B for that, but the weather was not looking great. So some of the unexpected collaboration was the morning there. I was like, oh no, what are we going to do? We show up, it's pouring down rain. And one of the person who's the market manager for the city farmers market offered us to put some of our work on the tables, so that if it was a rained out thing, we could still, have something of an event happen, which was very generous. And that, I think, it's hard to put it in words, but I think it was kind of like creating an opportunity for other people to pitch in and help me was part of what made it fun for everybody. So he ended up realizing we really don't really know what we're doing. So he went and got us a canopy. So we had him find a canopy from downtown Roanoke and help set it up, and came at the end of the day to take it down. So there was a lot of opportunity for people to just pitch in and help make it work out. So that was very positive.
Great. That's a nice takeaway. Do you have any other takeaways that you think are going to guide you in future projects?
Well, I think it was a real affirmation for me, because I keep going. I have a tendency to zoom out, but this was a real practical opportunity, or a genuine, real experience of something that was just a philosophical thought. We were all getting over the pandemic, and we're lonely, and we're missing being together. So my goal of this project was to really address that. I didn't come right out and say, we're going to get over the pandemic by getting together. But that was the overall goal, was to kind of have people have an experience of being in a community. It was very diverse. It was very unpredictable. It wasn't set who was coming. People in the public who just happened to be downtown walked through. And so it was a really spontaneous experience for a lot of people. It was all very, I think, just the creative space that the 7 or 8 columns that are already created and decorate the space were really easy to play off of, to do art projects off of. But then the big star of the show were the ginkgo trees, and the fact that the yellow tree leaves had fallen and made this gorgeous golden carpet that was surreal, but also very natural. So it was like a connection to the natural world in our town, in our community. It wasn't overwhelming. We had no amplification of the music. People could talk. If they wanted to listen to the music, they could stand near the music, but if they wanted to have a conversation, they could have a conversation, which was very deliberate on my part. And I guess I have read this book early on that was called The Power of Fun. And I really took it to heart that having fun is a natural need for building our resilience. And we can enjoy a lot of activities, but the real most fun is when you do something with friends. So this was a space to have people have the most fun. Like, that was real fun, So I'm really happy about it. I think it really it's hard to put into words, but there is a word that I learned from that book, and it's collective effervescence. Is a term that people use for that state of mind, why people go to festivals, why we have a different feeling when we are in a group and something happens. And I really caught my attention. So I felt like we accomplished that.
Terrific. Thank you, Catherine. You really modeled that for us, kind of to be the interview subject. Does anybody have any questions for Catherine?
I do want to thank the folks that did come. Several of the folks here, and that's something I want to be a part of. And I also really appreciate the other people who are a part of this Year of the Artist showed up, and they were moral support for me, and I really appreciate it. So I want to thank you guys who were able to pull it off. So thank you.
Terrific. Thanks, Catherine. So now that and I won't put anybody on the spot, but we'll give you an opportunity. If anyone saw the question, please tell me a story about a time when you worked on a challenge with others and you're proud of what you accomplished. If a project came to anybody's mind, it doesn't have to be an art project. It doesn't have to be a Year of the Artist project. It could be anything. If a project came to mind, or something a challenge that you worked on with others and something that you're proud of, and you want to share that with us, we'd love to have another example, and we can talk about the 2 examples together. And you can just raise your hand or wave at me, and like I said, I won't put anybody on the spot.
So I mean, are you looking for for in community, or like what came to my mind was recording an album with a group of musicians.
Terrific. Tell us about that. Tell us a story about that.
Okay, so when we recorded our last album, we actually had financing for it, and that was a big deal. And so we were able to book a studio in Richmond, Virginia called The Sound of Music. It was an old warehouse, and they actually had a space where we could stay upstairs, which made it great. We just went down there for 2 weeks and lived in the studio and recorded an album of music together. And prior to going there for the 2 weeks, we rented a space to rehearse, and we rehearsed ourselves to death. We had a big war map on the wall, of the songs we're going to record, and hashed out every single detail of it, and who was going to play what and when. And then we went in the studio and did it. And at the same time, we were open to the advice from the recording engineers. For instance, one of the guitar solos, they wanted to be really echoey. So they put one of those, I don't know, one of those fancy old time guitar amps. I can't think what it is right now. And they put it in the bottom of an elevator shaft and dropped a microphone down to record it, and stuff like that. So I guess that was the most intense creative experience I've ever had.
And what caused it to be so intense and creative? Were there some elements in the recipe for that?
Well, just living with this group of people, for that long, and really just eating and recording, eat, sleep, record. That was all we did. And so that was a very intense process. And it's not one that, previous, it was like, hey, we got $100, we could go Saturday night for 2 hours. This wasn't like that. This was just all focused, everybody in, we're off work, we're just focused on the work. And it turned out to be a really great album. And we ended up naming it Click, because everything finally clicked, and it didn't always seem like it was going to do that.
Tell me a little bit more about a moment where it didn't seem like it was going to click.
Our drummer had a confidence attack and just started. They wanted him to play with the click track, and he had never done that before. That's another reason it's called Click. And so he was getting all nervous about it and getting ahead, speeding up all the songs. And that made all the punches impossible to do, because it has to be on that beat or they can't punch in. So that was a big part of it. That was probably the biggest part of it.
So how were you able as a group to help the drummer address the challenge, or how did he or she address the challenge?
Just a lot of late night talks. A lot of late night talks up on the roof, just talking about the things that we had done and trying to build that confidence back up, and not be so overwhelmed by the magnitude of I've got to perform now, and really dealing with something that the whole band had not addressed, was that we sped up and slowed down in live performance, and it made us much better musicians in the long run.
Interesting. So it was more than just the drummer as well, probably, but you were able to help him be a leader, kind of the role the drummer can and does play in maintaining the tempo. Yeah. Great. All right. So let's hold that. We've got two. Kelly, it looked like you had your hand up. And then Kyle, will come back over to you.
Okay. Last year, I got asked to contribute a mural to my school where I worked last year. And it was actually our test coordinator, who always works with getting the SOLs done, who had this grand idea for a mural featuring the 3 branches of government. And I had never done a mural in a school building before. And he had a very clear idea of what he wanted. He just didn't know how to put it together. So we went through a couple different sketches and drawings, And then he liked it, the composition I came up with. And then it had to get approved by administration. Then we had to get materials from the bookkeeper. And it took many months of me working for an hour or two after my school day, which was interesting. You can only stay in the building a certain amount of time before everybody goes home, and you really need to go home. So it took a while, but it's now in the 8th grade hallway of my school, and it's the 3 branches of government represented with the statue of Abraham Lincoln, the Capitol building, and the Statue of Justice. And it's all in one composition at the end of the hall.
Great. So
So
you,
it was fun to collaborate with people.
was there any point in that collaboration where you felt like things were off track?
I also helped with the drama program there, and it left me with 0 free time because I was in rehearsals and helping with costumes, and I just didn't have the time to continue it. And for a couple of months there, I had 0 time to work on it. So there was a mural half on the wall, half not on the wall. And I got a few interesting looks from coworkers thinking, when are you going to finish the mural? Is it going to get done? But once everything got back on track, it all got finished, and I was really happy with it.
Okay. All right. So there are 3 examples. Now, Kyle, what's your story?
Well, when I started doing laughter yoga, I was working with a fellow who was very excited about it and kind of brought me into it kicking and screaming. But he really didn't have the energy, or he had the idea, and but apparently he needed me to do a lot of the work and the connecting with people. And I'm pretty much a solo performer. And so, but he started, would call senior news and write articles for them and announce that we were having this laughter yoga at the library. And before I knew it, now I'm having to write the article once a month. So sometimes things aren't necessarily self-directed for artists because we're a little scattered, maybe. And but I did learn quite a bit from that. And so for my 2nd year project for my Association for Applied Therapeutic Humor, I had to come up with something that involved humor. And of course, being an artist, that meant combining my art with some sort of a humor presentation in nursing homes. And because I've been doing the laughter yoga, I thought, well, can I come up with a performance program for elder care facilities? And I'd never even been in an elder care facility, let alone a memory care facility where there's a lot of different people there. So when I first did it, I brought all the tools, puppets and my drawings and bells and whistles and my crazy costumes. And I think what I learned in working with activity directors was to trust the people who are knowledgeable about the disadvantaged group that you're trying to serve. You have to pull in their information. You have to listen to their experience and not necessarily mold your vision. You want to illuminate their solutions and their problems. And so I learned a lot about emotional intelligence. And I guess as I went along, I found out, just like you said a minute ago, it's not rocket science. There are different styles of doing a project, and no one is right or the perfect way to do it. When you're in an elder care facility with people who have Alzheimer's and somebody just starts doing circles in front of you, or worse, taking their pants down and pooping, in front of you, you have to wing it. It blows the schedule. All case in that case, you kind of back up and let the staff handle it. And it's kind of knowing, being part of the team that comes there, because of course they have to get their people in. So I found over the course of the year of doing this project, just pretty much refining a style that would work and adapt to that demographic. I found that they couldn't come to me, to my easel, that I had to go to them. So my dad created wheels for my easel. He designed and made a little dolly. It's the only dolly my dad ever gave me, by the way. So that I could swivel the dolly around so everybody could see the artwork that I was doing. And the puppets would sometimes engage people, but sometimes people, you have every level of cognitive ability sometimes within those rooms. So you have to play to the top and to the bottom. And no matter what you do, there's going to be a learning curve about how to read the room, how to come into the room, how to present yourself. And the best thing you can do is I started by taking my whole trunk into the room, and I found simplifying and paring it down to the essentials helped clarify the message and or the entertainment, and was more productive.
Great. That's a perfect example. Thank you, Kyle. All right. So we heard four different stories of challenges that were addressed by working with a group of people, and results that they were proud of. Did anybody hear any, kind of look for some observations. Did anybody hear any themes that were echoed across one or more of the stories?
Well, I'll just chime in. It seemed like, from what I heard, everybody had to learn to work with the people they were working with. Like you couldn't just do your thing. You had to interact with other people, and the more clarity you had, what the other people, what their goals were. I feel like for me, being the creative one, it was easier for me to adapt my plan to what they were visualizing than it would be to ask these people who were very uncomfortable with change to change their plan. So it was easier for me to adapt and be open, but getting them to be clear about what it is that they wanted. And I heard that with Kelly and with all you folks, learning what they wanted and how could you be creative, going to the client in a different way to meet their needs, rather than this is what I'm going to do, and then present it in a way that's very rigid and not able to adapt to reality of other people's needs. So that's what I heard.
Yeah, I heard that clarity of purpose, kind of the honoring the wisdom of the group or the wisdom of the experts that you're working with, because everyone's an expert in something, right? And what they do, in their perspective, and their experience in life. So honoring that and building from that. Yeah, I heard both of you. I heard some trust in there as well, trusting the process, and that if you put it out there, people will be there as well to help you with it. You're not in it alone. Yeah. Kyle, did you have?
Yeah, the other thing is that what I heard is in being artist, we brought an element that with most nonprofits or groups isn't there. I saw a meeting, Go Virginia, just from outside the door, and there's all these people sitting at tables watching a PowerPoint, and how many groups that's all they do is sit around and Zoom and PowerPoints. And you bring an artist into it, all of a sudden you've got artwork on tables, you've got a mural on the wall, you've got puppets and caricatures, you got a new speech bubble, so to speak, that grabs attention. So as artists, I think we can amplify and put people's messages in a brand new cartoon bubble. Excellent. That will illuminate their initiatives or their goals in a way that they can't imagine, because that's just the way they've always done it. So And an example, I'm trying to make some cards for somebody, and they're being very literal with, okay, have a person hugging a person. And, I thought, well, why does it have to be a person on the card? Why not a talking comb and a brush comforting somebody that's had a bad hair day? And the comb and the brush are saying, we can help. Right.
Yeah.
So that's, you get to be wildly creative like that. And kind of, we bring metaphors, storytelling into the areas. At least that's what I want to do.
Yes. And they're not going to ask you for the metaphor. They will not, they don't know.
It won't occur to them.
They don't know they need the metaphor.
That's true.
And they will ask you, I talked to John about this, I think at one point, that someone will say, or to maybe Jane as well, if someone will say, well, I know you paint a mural, you can paint a mural, or you're an artist, or I know you do sculpture. So why don't you do a sculpture for us? Where really, if you step back and look at those goals that Catherine mentioned, there might be another solution, or just your process might be more valuable in other ways than that product. Now, did I hear you say it was a Go Virginia meeting, Kyle? Oh, you're on mute.
Yes, I didn't go in the door. I was just there to
I see.
connect with somebody that was from Lynchburg, and I had to give him some caricatures. So I just needed to make sure I was in the right place. But I looked in the window, and I just felt so sorry for those folks, because I thought, boy, I'm glad I'm not one of those people sitting around the table every day.
Yeah, well, terrific. And
were you there?
No. I didn't know if it was a Go Virginia meeting. It's a regional economic structure that I work with.
Yeah.
So yeah. But, okay. So I mentioned that I'm going to dive into some of this, and we're going to refer back to just some of what we just discussed. So these liberating structures, and so that they define liberating structures as adaptable microstructures that make it quick and simple for groups to radically improve how they interact and work together. And I mentioned all this is free, and it's online, and it's at liberatingstructures.com. And none of this, again, I mean, you'll see that they're drawing from lots of different sources, and you'll find tools similar to this in other places as well. But this is just one for us to look through a little bit. Now, so first off, they said adaptable microstructures. So what's a microstructure? Well, compared to a macro structure, so macro meaning big and broad, and micro meaning smaller and specific. So a macro structure is like an office building, tangibly, an office building, a school, a hospital, a factory. That's a tangible macro structure. Intangible macro structures are strategies, an organizational chart, think about that like a bureaucracy, the organizational chart that you've got, policies and procedures, compensation incentives, core operating processes, and grants of authority. Now, a microstructure, so micro, smaller and specific, instead of an office building on the tangible side, or a school or a factory, it could be the room, the classroom in a school, the boardroom, a meeting room, a restaurant, the water cooler inside of a building, a place where people interact less formally, more casually, but they make connections. Intangible structures, so ways to present information, presentation, lecture, manage discussion, a report, an open discussion, a brainstorming session. And then these things that we're going to talk about tonight, kind of liberating structures. So you can kind of think about it as, something formal. So the Arts Commission might be a macro structure because it's been granted authority by the city council to do work in the community. And the Arts Commission has given these grants and creating these, residencies as opportunities for the microstructures. So how do we give artists resources and say, okay, experiment, find spaces in the community, find, or, here you're attached to this small department. How can you dig into a space or a process or a goal, and try and do things differently? So a microstructure, we're focused on those smaller, less formal things. So we're also focused on the culture of an organization or a community. And here are the three things that they're in their framework that they say shape a culture. So the beliefs, and those beliefs can be unexamined, taken for granted assumptions. So things that we believe, and you can just tell what a group believes by the way they do things. Values, and the values can be listed, organization. You'll see it sometimes. You walk in that room where Kyle saw the PowerPoint, they probably had posters, and they said, here are our values, here are our goals, here's our mission. So those values are those things that are kind of codified or put in writing and presented to say, this is our strategy. This is why we're here. This is what we believe, or not. Yeah, very specifically, kind of the values and beliefs, the ones that are stated. And then habits. So the habits are just how people are doing things. Observable patterns of interaction. So if we want to change something, if you want to kind of intervene in this culture and change the culture, the question is, how do you do it? So if I was in the Navy, and it's very top down, and it would probably be, in a top down, a large organization, a bureaucracy. There it's very kind of authoritative because the captain of the ship has all the power. They would probably focus on those values. They'd say, okay, here's what we believe, here's what we're going to change. Our goals, we're going to shift strategy, we're going to do X, and you're going to line up and do it. So that's probably, a large institution, a bureaucracy, you probably have, you think, oh, this is how we have to do it if we're ever going to make it happen. So in the city, you'd think, okay, well, the city manager or city council would say, okay, here's our path forward, and we're going to do it. Now, the question in this liberating structures is, if you change that and focus on habits instead, and just start to act differently, is that a better way, potentially, in these small microstructures? If we just put an artist in a department, if we give lots of little grants to artists to start doing things visibly in the community and start exploring and doing things differently, is that a way to make it bubble up from below rather than be kind of directed from above? So that's the focus. That's really the main focus of this liberating structure. So liberating, kind of freeing. Is there a way that we can use tools and techniques to free us from the way that we've been doing things? And they say, okay, here are 10 liberating leadership practices that they've got listed. And saying that, okay, if you start actually doing these things and acting on those habits, that you start to internalize it, it becomes the way you do things. Then if you do that and these structures become part of your everyday interactions, leaders are doing these things. 1, including and unleashing everyone. So more people involved. Never starting without a clear and common purpose. Catherine mentioned that, kind of that clarifying purpose. Practicing deep respect for people and local solutions. Building trust. Learning by failing forward. Love that one. Practicing self-discovery within every group, kind of intentionally. Oh, here's what we're learning in this. Here's what we learned by doing this. Here's who we are. We didn't know that was who we were as a group. Amplifying freedom and responsibility. So instead of being directed, here's how you're going to do something. It's very different to kind of start to do something because that's the way you believe it should be done, that you're acting with your own kind of freedom. Emphasizing possibilities, believing something can happen before you see it. The mural on the wall, the festival in the in Century Plaza, the album recorded at the coolest place in Richmond, the engaged residents of a care facility, inviting creative destruction to enable innovation. So if leaders are doing this, they're able to kind of break what's happening already so they can do things in a different way. Being willing to say, yeah, we've always done this way, but let's do it a different way. Or we've never done this before. No one's ever had a ginkgo festival. Or it could be that there's a policy that says, oh, well, you can't have a festival in a certain place, or a regulation or unspoken kind of tradition. You've got to be able to break that and able to advance. And then engaging in seriously playful curiosity. And there's that word play again. So seriously playful curiosity. What can I learn by doing this, doing something differently? What can I learn about the people I'm working with? What can I learn about myself? So here's the question. So those 10 things, if we want to create those liberating structures by working, kind of across the city rather than working from the leadership structure within the city, how might artists be exactly the ones to help us do this? Why would we start with artists if we wanted to include and unleash everyone, if we wanted to build trust? Catherine,
I could say one reason is artists are, or maybe I'm speaking for myself, we're used to failure, and we're used to not being, not having things be perfect, and we're okay with that. And we're also used to and comfortable with a lot of uncertainty. And I think all of those things are part of we're all good with that. I think it crosses a line though, and this is something I don't see. I was trying to read it into these things, but I think one thing before you can do any of these things, there has to be some way of the clarity and a sense of safety. The people won't change their habits if they feel there's going to be a negative consequence. So I think learning how I don't know the answer to that question, but I feel like in some way that is crucial. People need to feel safe. They need to feel that they can try something different, fail, and not be made ridicule or lose status if they didn't get everything right the first time around. So I think artists are used to, I would like to say, not that we want to be used to failure, but I think a lot of us have had things that we tried to do that didn't work. And I think sometimes, you try a little something in your studio and it doesn't work. So for me, this is trying a big thing, not in my studio, and it could not work, but I got a lot of practice with things not working. So I have also a lot of confidence that it might work.
So has your studio practice where you're trying things and you could become more comfortable with the things that don't work, the things that fail, did that help you or prepare you to be able to take the risk in a very public way of putting on a festival with multiple partners?
Yeah, I think it did. I think it really made me able to I think not just saying, and this is after decades of failure. So it's not just like, oh, that didn't work. Everything else I've ever dreamed up has all gone perfect, but this one thing didn't work out. No, this is lots of things that I've tried and lots of times having to stop back over. But I do remember one time teaching in my studio and telling one of my students, it came out very, kind of one of those conversations you have, but I basically said, it's like when you make mistakes in the studio, it's a little problem. but you know that you can fix it. And that's what you want to take into whatever you do in your life. You know, whatever little problem you run into, it's like, oh, I tried this, it didn't work. Now I'm going to try this other thing. So I think that's where creativity means you keep trying. Not every idea is the perfect best idea. You know, even if my brilliant Drinko Tea Festival, which they did love and it did work out, but it could have been a downpour. It could have been a wash. You know, it could have not worked out at all. And that always was there, that possibility.
There could have not been a leaf on a tree or a leaf on the ground.
Oh my God, you're right. So yeah, there's a little bit of a being comfortable with uncertainty, I think, is one of the things that you have to model. That has to be something that people sense that comes from you if you're going to go into a group and ask them to change how they present themselves or how they go about their habits.
Nicely said. That modeling, that is such a big part of leadership in any realm. Let me focus on that question Catherine had. The question was about safety, creating a space where people feel safe, that they're going to be working with you, and there's a chance of risk, but things can work out, and if they don't work out, that you can manage that together and deal with it. Does anybody see anything in those 10 items that can contribute toward that? Kelly.
These all are ringing really, really true with me today, because I did a dive into theater season at the middle school where I used to work. I measured about 40 kids for costumes, and I see this with them all the time, because in a theater, age starts to matter less and less, and it's all about individual contributions to produce a whole. And I see so much self-discovery within the group, and watching people amplify their freedom and gain in their personal responsibility as part of that collaboration. It doesn't really matter if you're a teacher or a grandma or a middle schooler in this sort of a collaborative effort. Everybody has their role, everybody has their job, and we're all somewhat learning together. But the people that support them are the ones that help make them feel safe, and that they have someone they can ask for help, sort of a mentoring mentality. And I see this so much, especially in theater, and that's why I enjoy it so much.
That's a really good example, and that amplifying freedom and responsibility. And you can see as you take, and Catherine mentioned, creating opportunities for people to participate, to take responsibility for an element of it. And you can see that number 4, building trust as you go. That's one way of building trust in yourself, that you'll be able to deliver your part because you've taken responsibility. You said, I'm going to do it, and you do it. And then building trust in the people who are supporting you. They're building and kind of often coordinating and leading the effort. They're building trust with the group that they're supporting. Yeah. And that trust it's got to be paramount, right? In that safe space, or the space that people feel that they can contribute.
Yeah, actually, I just see that I had written that down, so I think I didn't see it on there, but now I see that. I guess that would be, I would put that as being, I mean, before you can expect people to unleash themselves, I would put like building trust as like a really top of the list. And then the next, what are we doing? First, I trust you, what are we doing? Like, what are we going to try to do here? But yeah. I think that would be really, I mean, they're all good things to have, but I think I just see that having that sense of comfort and just, they all play into that. You're respecting each other, and you're not going to be treated disrespectfully. But I think originally breaking being made aware that people in general are very uncomfortable with change. You know, just if you're putting, I just feel that people already have suspicious of artists and they don't want to change. So just putting an artist in a group and thinking they're going to welcome you with open arms is not wise. I think it's wiser to realize that there will be some discomfort. So how do we address that right to start with and then move forward?
Yeah, there'll be discomfort because it's different, because that's the growth opportunity and that's what makes us uncomfortable. And part of the challenge as you're working in groups is helping the group manage that right level of discomfort, so that they can work through. And I think that they include and unleash everyone as number one, and that kind of their primary focus in this whole effort or structure is to say, involve people from the very beginning. Involve people from the very, very beginning. As bring people together. It doesn't matter what kind of project it is. We're focused on these kind of community projects. It's not just the artist in the studio, and that's a critical component of it. That's where you're. In a way, I bet that's where a bunch of you are filling your cup, right? So that you can go out in the world and do work as well. That time where you are deep in your flow and your process and your work, it can be regenerative, I think, and a source to draw on. But as you're doing this community work, how can you engage people and involve them from the very beginning? So all these liberating structures, these technologies and tools, people, yeah, thanks, Kyle. That's exactly it. People support what they help create. That's fundamental to it. These tools and technologies are all, like most of them, they're really about bringing people together. So if you bring 400 people together to talk about an issue, a critical issue in the community, how can you best design that conversation? And so these things that are, in a way, are really thinking about those kinds of interactions. But the same thing applies, and all these tools apply to this, to a smaller project, a larger conversation. Like we do these, we use these in this session that Katie and I did around the ORs, the outcomes, agendas, roles, and responsibilities. We said, yeah, these are tools for a meeting, but they're also tools to develop and design a project. So it is almost 8 o'clock. Let me just flip through a couple more slides, and I'm going to share a couple of samples out of this. Now, so here's one, and and we'll go ahead, we'll walk through them, and then we might stay on, and maybe somebody wants to volunteer to go through one of these, which might be fun. But the 9 whys, and you've done this before, I bet, in some way. So asking the question why over and over again, in a way. So you can partner with somebody in a way to do this, and to have a questioner and to have one person responding. So you choose a current project, something that you're working on, and you ask the question, okay, what do you do when you're working on this project? And you just make a list of your activities, 5 or 6 things that you do while you're working on the project, or it could be a thing you do all the time. It could be a thing that you're doing once. So what are the items? You make that short list of activities, and then you ask the question, why is that important to you? And it could be the items that you're doing. It could be one item that just is the thing that is in your mind. Like number 3 is the one that really stays in my mind when I think is one of the critical activities that I'm doing. Why is it important to you? And you just ask that question 9 times. You can ask it in different ways. You don't always say, well, why is that important to you? Or say, well, and you can just keep going deeper, though. And the whole purpose of this is to find, that purpose of your work. And by the end of those nine questions, you should be able to come up with a personal touchstone for you individually, and then kind of the fundamental justification of why your project is there for the larger community. And you can't really ask yourself. I think you really need a partner to do this. I don't think I'd be able to ask myself why and get a good response. But if you have somebody sitting across the table from you, I think it'll work. So that's one thing. So that clarity of purpose. So Catherine talked about fun. She had the clarity of purpose around fun. She had kind of gone through this. She had, through her thinking and reading, fun, came down to fun. And then also she referred to the motto or the goal of Sister Cities, and promoting peace, one person and one community at a time. And so that became part of her mantra and another personal touchstone for her in how she was doing what she was doing. And remember, we keep saying the process is more important than the product. And so having those things in the back of the mind will help you in those decisions. Do I do X or do I do Y? Oh, well, X is going to be more fun. X is going to help us or help me come about this with a sensibility and an approach that's going to be reinforcing peace, for instance. Okay, so that's 9 whys. That's one example of a process. Another is this TRIZ, which turns out it's based in kind of a Russian problem-solving technique, and it's a much deeper thing, and you'll see references to it in a lot of places. But the idea of this is to think about, we do game playing in our heads. We think about what can go wrong. This is very specifically what are we doing wrong that's going to mess something up. So in order to do this kind of thinking, once you've got you could be doing this with a committee, and you say, okay, let's make a list of everything we're doing, everything we can do to make sure we achieve the worst possible outcome, the worst imaginable outcome with respect to our top goal. So Catherine could say, okay, what can I do to make this miserable and not fun at all? So what are the things I can do? And then so you make a list of all those things, and then you go down that list and you say, okay, is there anything that we're actually doing that is kind of like this? And it could be that Kyle might say, you know what, we're going to do a PowerPoint meeting, and it's going to have 542 slides with no pictures and a lot of words. And we're making everybody sit in a room with no windows and for 6 hours and listen to it. And they say, okay, was there anything that we're doing that's kind of close to that? Well, you know what? An hour of sitting straight through PowerPoint slides might not be a fun thing either. And then
it's not memorable.
It's not memorable. Yeah. So we would adjust from that. And the thing is, you got to be really honest about it, and be willing to, even going through this effort is a willingness to change and to solve problems in a different way. Being willing to sit down and go through this. And of course, once you have the item, you've got to say, okay, what can we do to stop doing that, to stop killing people with those PowerPoints? And then finally, this is the last one I'll list. And there are a whole bunch of them in this book, and we'll probably keep pulling back to them in different ways as we need them. This one I think is terrific, and this is another way artists are perfect, because artists are observers, right? If you really want to see something, try and paint it. If you want to, or try and draw it, because we have these. We think a duck looks like one thing in our mind. And then when we actually start to draw it, we go, oh, wait a minute. The duck's eyes are very different than what I was thinking they were. Once you look at it and you really start to observe. So if you're working on a project, like John's working on Complete Streets, he might go out and sit at an intersection one day and just watch how people use the space. just sit there quietly, and watch, and then make some observations. And then he might start to see some patterns. And if he sees some patterns, he might want to interview some of the people that he sees doing it. It might be that somebody's leaving a scooter at an intersection every day. Like, well, why do you leave it there? Would there be a more convenient place for you to leave that scooter? So you could observe them, then you could do some follow-up interviews. And one way to do this might be interesting, to have two people doing it. Have a friend doing it as well, independently, and then get together and compare notes and have conversation about it, because we all see things differently and have different, make different observations. When I was looking at this one, it reminded me of one of my favorite books. This guy William White wrote this book City, and he just went, that's what he did. He just went and stood on New York City like corners and on the street and watched people. And he has their videos. If you Google him, William White, you'll find lots of good stuff out there about him. But one of the things he noticed was that we'll do lots of things to make things work more smoothly with transportation and sidewalks, and and getting people from point A to point B. And there's he noticed just a natural thing that people do when they want to have a conversation with somebody. You pass them on the sidewalk and you see them, and the thing to do, you go, oh, hey, let's talk, and let's move over here, kind of close to the curb, where we're out of the way. But that's not what they do. When people cross each other, they move right into the center of the traffic of people on the street, like the most in the way that they can be. So if you were trying to create a space that was welcoming to people, and that encourage those kind of interactions, how would you shape it? But it starts with that observation. So now, no matter what you're working on, there might be some observations that can come into play. And fortunately, a lot of the problem solving that's happening around social issues now, you hear people say lived experience. So how are we talking to people? How are we designing from people who are living in the situations we're trying to address? And I would think, Kyle, in the memory care unit, I would think that the observation is a big key component of it. I had a design teacher years and years ago, and she designed memory care units for Russian immigrants, and the memories that they retained were from the villages that they came from in Russia. So they're creating design elements in the care facility that reminded them of the village, the promenade, specific architectural features and such. At any rate, that's all kind of creative problem solving and ways, and design. That's artist. Those are art skills. Okay, so let me see. Are there any questions about those few things that we talked about in the kind of this liberating structures framework? All right. Well,
I guess I have one question. I guess one question would be, I'm still, what I'm trying to understand is that you guys are thinking to help groups work more efficiently, become more successful at what they want to do. So we're going to bring an artist into this group. And I guess my one question would be, is that something the group is asked for, welcoming, wanting? Because that, I think, that starts right off with that sense of safety that I was saying. If you are being welcomed into and invited into a group, rather than being like, we're not loving your product, so we're going to bring someone in that's going to motivate you to do things differently.
You made a statement earlier that it didn't ring true for me necessarily, and it was about being invited in. And I'll say that, like, we got a grant to do this work, and I approached people in the city, and I said, "Hey, I got some money. You want to kind of do this?" And people were like, "Yes." People jumped on it immediately. No one said no. And in fact, more people said yes than we had money for. So let's see, I had money for 7. So four of them paid for it. 4 of them said, "Oh, you don't have any more resources? Here, I'll pay for the artist."
Oh,
So yeah, I haven't heard people, and I think there is a real willingness, especially when someone comes in with that role and the expectation that their job is to help do things differently, help to see things with new eyes. Yeah, I haven't. This is all voluntary. Nobody's forcing it on anybody. And where we're having some slow, like with the artist in residence program, where we're having some slower starts, it's because of internal people leaving their jobs or whatnot in the city. It's not from a lack of interest. Yeah. So Kyle.
Yeah, in that regard, when I started working with the gun committee, and I'm not an artist in residence, but I was working with them even prior to YOTA started. They were there was no process for onboarding an artist, and I think there should be with YOTA some sort of onboarding that you give the artist to introduce themselves, that explains the program and lets them present, this is why I'm here, and this is what I'm here to help you do. And does anybody have any questions? It might take 10 minutes of the meeting, but I do know that the Gun Council, they had 2 committees, and then those 2 committees merged into one. And then you had the main board committee, and I wasn't aware really of what committee I was a part of, because it was all changing. So unless you have a contact person that utilizes you and knows why you're there, then you might not really get plugged in, and the whole concept of YOTA might be deemed a failure because it wasn't. So how do you measure the success if somebody doesn't really get plugged in?
Yeah, and it's gonna just, the reality is it's gonna have to be both ways. So the key as well is, how does an artist also, like, kind of, there's a little bit of pushing that does have to happen. So and Jane did that really well.
No, I can do it really well too, but I think a lot of artists are listeners, and I'm out in the public all the time. Jane has her music, so she's out in the public, and Kelly, she obviously, with her theater, she's used to being in front of people. But even on the YOTA Zoom call here, I know we've got some invisible people here, and I love y'all. I can't see you. I don't even know who you are, but I really, how do you connect with your
so
groups?
we set up conversations with the staff people, with the artists. We went through and did a round of those. Before the artists came on board, I had meetings individually with the staff people.
Okay.
So but at the same time, we've had some staff transitions as well, and like you said, lots of maneuvering in between structurally with the Gun Violence Commission. But yeah, and there's something else as well. There's been the resources there ready for the Gun Violence Commission to use, and they've been sitting there for a while. There's something there's still some work we have to do in kickstarting, I think. But yeah, Kelly.
I wanted to bring up something, actually, to sort of springboard off of Catherine's recent project. I was really thankful to be reminded of the whole Tree Steward program that collaborated with her on that, because last year something interesting happened that brought to mind the Tree Stewards. Roanoke does this thing where they do the Dickens of the Christmas every year, and they go and they find a Christmas tree. Well, last year they had picked a Christmas tree in a nearby park that had been there for 20 years. And it blew up on social media, and there was a definite lack of communication involved in all directions, basically. Long story short, that tree that was selected didn't get cut down because the community wanted it there. And it was last year, that time, that I suggested, why not develop a program that collaborates between the people that are responsible for selecting the tree, which is all city managed, and the tree stewards, which is a respected organization that works with the city to some degree. So why don't we just get a group that will purchase a tree from a local Christmas tree farm that is the right species of tree, and find properties that are willing to donate the space, properties with large lawns, parks that are there, maybe owned by schools or things. And then every spot buys a tree, and in 10 years, it gets a companion. Once that first tree is big enough to be cut down, you don't have an empty spot, you have a companion. When that tree is 10 years old, it gets a companion, and it just keeps building. And there's 20 spots all over the city with Christmas trees that people are free to decorate while they're growing. And we always have another reliable tree.
I think that companion was key, because wasn't that tree, hadn't it been planted there to be a Christmas tree at some point? At some
It
point.
had, but it didn't have
Yeah.
companions. Then people have a real sense of ownership, and it brought to mind the idea that we could commission artists to put up plaques saying this tree was purchased by such and such group for the purpose of being downtown in such and such year. That's the beauty of the Tree Stewards program. They care for trees long term and monitor where they are and how long they need to be there. That way, there's never a spot where there's just no tree. It could be a whole line of trees, depending on the amount of space. Different municipal properties have large lawns with nothing on them, and it's no more work to cut around one large tree than it is to just cut a large lawn.
Yeah.
So it's a viable option.
You can almost imagine a countdown toward that tree's big spotlight. You know? Yeah.
And the
so
tree you
that's the
plant as a fifth
expectation.
grader, the tree you help plant as a fifth grader, maybe you watched it downtown when you've got your first child or something, or you graduate college or something.
Well, excellent. I can see we need to, maybe next year, if we get another round of this, we'll need to have an artist in residence with the tree stewards. Yeah.
It would be nice. I asked
They
them
would do
about
it.
it. I asked them about it, and they said, "Oh, how nice! I'll forward your email to the person responsible." And who knows if it'll get lost in the
Well,
shuffle.
we can navigate that. Well, we're a little bit over time, but I really enjoyed the conversation with everybody. Thank you for sharing your examples. That is what brings all this to life. It helps us think through it. I'll probably make those slides available as well. But all those like tools and such, they've got everything listed on that website. If you get interested in that and look at it. But we'll also have the recording up tonight as well. But yeah. Anything else? All right. Well,